Welcome to SecOps, the podcast created by Ben, Moyes, and Sneh, and powered by Cyber Viewpoint.
It's great to be here for this.
This is Cyber Viewpoint Originals, the podcast where we decode modern cybersecurity strategies and real-world defenses for today's digital world. This is the Practical Cybersecurity Series where we skip the theory and get into what you can actually do. In Episode 3, we're tackling incident response specifically, how to do it without a $1 million SOC, a team of analysts, or a shelf full of enterprise tools. Because breaches don't wait for your budget to catch up, and when something goes wrong, the difference between a bad day and a catastrophic one is whether you had a plan.
Yeah, that plan is, it's everything, really.
It really is. So I want you to picture a scenario for a second. It's like 4:50 p.m. on a Friday.
Oh, the absolute worst time.
Right. I mean, the office is starting to quiet down. People are packing up their bags. They're eyeing the door. Everyone's already thinking about their weekend plans.
Yep, the calm before the storm.
Exactly. Right now, it's just calm. But let's say an employee in the accounting department is just trying to clear out their inbox before heading home.
Rushing through things.
Yeah, totally rushing. They see an email marked like urgent, overdue invoice from what looks like a vendor they communicate with all the time.
And they just click it.
They just click the attached PDF. Or, we don't even need an employee to make a mistake. Maybe there's a remote desktop protocol port, an RDP port, just sitting exposed to the public internet.
Because someone needed to work from home like a few weekends ago and just forgot to close it.
Exactly. So an attacker out on the internet runs a simple brute force script, cracks the weak password, and they quietly slip into the network.
And usually, for a few days, nothing happens at all.
Right. But then, right at that 4:50 p.m. mark on Friday, screens across the entire office suddenly flicker, and then they lock up.
That's the moment.
A menacing ransom note drops onto every single desktop. Files are suddenly appended with these strange extensions. Pure panic sets in. And the thing is, there is no incident response plan.
None at all.
There's no checklist. There's just a room full of professionals staring at encrypted screens, listening to the hum of the servers, realizing they have absolutely no idea what to do next.
Yeah, and see, that specific moment, the realization that the screens are locked, the data is just gone, that's the moment when every single preventative measure you've invested in is officially obsolete.
It's all failed.
Every bit of it. The firewalls, the endpoint antivirus, the multi-factor authentication, even that annual employee security training, all of it failed.
Wow. Yeah, when you put it like that.
Right. I mean, incident response is the ultimate safety net. It's the strategy you execute when the walls have actually been breached.
Because we spend so much time building those walls.
We do. We spend so much time and money in this industry trying to build higher walls, but the reality of modern cybersecurity is, well, it's fundamentally asymmetrical.
What do you mean by asymmetrical?
I mean, an attacker only needs to find one single gap, just one unpatched server or one tired employee clicking a link at 4:50 p.m. They only have to be right once.
And we have to be right all the time.
Exactly. The defense has to be right every single minute of every single day, and eventually the defense will fail. It's just inevitable.
So when that happens, the difference between like a minor operational hiccup and a totally company-ending catastrophe is just whether you have a plan ready to go.
A premeditated, coordinated response. You cannot rely solely on prevention. You need a way to salvage the network, evict the attacker, and just keep the business breathing.
It's kind of like having a fire escape route for a high-rise building.
That's a great way to look at it.
A fire escape is completely worthless if you only start trying to draw the blueprints after the hallway is already filling up with smoke.
Right, and the alarms are blaring.
Yeah. You need to know exactly where the stairs are before you even smell the smoke. But,
Right.
When we talk to small IT teams or organizations with really tight budgets, the immediate reaction is usually just defeat.
They think it's out of reach.
Totally. They look at enterprise incident response programs and they say, sure, a fire escape is great, but I don't have the budget to hire a dedicated team of firefighters.
I don't have $1 million for a SOC.
Exactly. The assumption is that planning for a breach requires massive capital.
And that is easily the most dangerous misconception in the industry today. I mean, the idea that incident response equals expensive enterprise software is completely false.
Okay, so what is it then?
Incident response is, at its very core, a methodology. It's an organized, repeatable process for handling chaos.
It's not a tool.
Right, not a tool. The software and the blinky light dashboards are just accessories to that process.
That makes sense.
If you have a documented plan, if you know exactly who has the authority to make critical decisions, If you understand how your network is physically and logically wired, you're already ahead of the curve.
And none of that costs money.
Absolutely nothing but time and critical thinking. If you don't have that process documented, well, the natural human reaction to a crisis just takes over.
Which a panic.
Pure panic. People make rushed, emotional decisions. Like a well-meaning IT administrator will just reboot a compromised server thinking it'll clear the malware.
Oh, just turn it off and on again.
Right, but in doing so, they permanently destroy volatile memory evidence that might have actually contained the encryption key.
Oh, wow. So they make it worse.
Much worse. Or they'll loudly start changing passwords and running mass antivirus scans.
Which tips off the attacker.
Exactly. It tells the attacker they've been spotted. And then the attacker just accelerates their timeline, deploying the ransomware company-wide before the IT team even knows what's happening.
So a solid plan just replaces that panic with procedural control.
That's exactly it.
Okay, so if you are listening to this deep dive right now, you can take the first step of building that plan today without spending a dime.
Definitely.
Take a piece of paper and identify the single most critical system in your organization, just the one database or the one application that if it went permanently offline today would absolutely bankrupt the company within a week.
And write it down.
Write it down. Just gaining that clarity, knowing what you're actually trying to protect when the house catches fire, that is the foundational step of incident response.
Yeah, and to build on that, once you know what you are protecting, you have to understand how to protect it. Incident response is not just this chaotic scramble. It's a highly structured 6-step life cycle.
Right. There's an acronym for this, isn't there?
There is. The industry standard framework is known as PICERL.
PICERO.
Right. Preparation, identification, containment, eradication, recovery, and lessons learned.
Got it.
And it is a continuous cycle. But here's the thing nobody tells you. While everyone wants to talk about the exciting parts,
like the forensics and fighting the bad guys.
Exactly, the containment stuff. But the absolute heavyweight champion of those 6 phases is preparation.
Really? Just preparing?
Oh, yeah. It's a constant feedback loop. If you skip the preparation phase, or if you just do it poorly, every single phase that follows becomes exponentially more difficult.
If not impossible, I imagine. Let's break down why preparation is so critical, because it just seems like such a generic corporate buzzword.
It does sound like a buzzword, but in this context, it has a very specific mechanical function. Think about the identification phase, which comes right after preparation.
Okay.
How can you possibly identify an anomaly on your network if you have no idea what normal looks like?
You can't see the needle if you don't know what the haystack is supposed to look like.
Precisely. If you don't have an accurate inventory of your assets, if you don't know the normal baseline of your daily network traffic, you are completely blind.
So give me an example of how that plays out.
Okay, let's say you see a massive outbound data transfer happening at 2:00 a.m. on a Sunday. Is that a malicious threat actor exfiltrating your customer database to an overseas server?
Which would be terrifying.
Right. Or is that just your marketing team's automated backup script syncing large video files to a cloud provider?
Oh, right, because marketing does that.
They do. And if you haven't done the preparation to map out those normal business processes, you will either ignore a catastrophic breach or you'll cause a massive false alarm and just burn out your entire team.
So it really all comes down to visibility. And, you know, this ties into an incredible concept from military strategy that I know is heavily applied in cybersecurity, the OD loop.
Ah, yes, the OD loop.
Observe, orient, decide, and act.
Yeah, John Boyd developed that for fighter pilots originally, but it perfectly describes the mechanics of a cyber breach.
Because it's essentially a dogfight, right?
It is. During an incident, you have 2 competing OD loops happening at the same time. You have your defensive loop and you have the attacker's loop.
So the attacker drops into your network.
And they observe their surroundings, like what subnet are they on? Then they orient themselves. Where are the domain controllers? Where are the file shares?
And they decide.
Right, they decide on a course of action, like let's dump the local password hashes to elevate privileges. And finally, they execute the script.
And while they are spinning that loop incredibly fast, the defender is usually just lagging behind.
Lagging terribly. Because if your preparation is poor, your defensive OD loop is incredibly sluggish.
It takes hours just to notice them.
Exactly. An alert fires, But it takes your team 3 hours just to observe the alert because it was buried in some shared inbox.
And then they have to figure out what it means.
That's the orient phase. It takes them 2 days to orient themselves because they have to track down who even owns the server, what the server does, and whether the logs are even turned on.
Oh man, by the time they figured that out.
By the time the defensive team decides to block an IP address and acts on it, the attacker has already pivoted to 3 different servers, established a hidden backdoor, and started a completely new OD loop.
So they're always 3 steps ahead.
Always. The entire goal of the preparation phase is just to speed up your defensive OD loop so you can actually intercept the adversary before they complete their mission.
Okay, but look, the pushback we always hear from small organizations is that speeding up that loop requires buying an incredibly complex SIEM.
A security information and event management system.
Right, a SIEM that takes 6 months to deploy and costs 6 figures to license. Isn't preparation just a fancy word for buying more tools?
No, not at all. You do not need a SIEM to start preparing. Preparation is largely procedural and administrative. Look at the Center for Internet Security, the CIS controls.
The basic fundamentals.
Right. The top 2 controls, the absolute most fundamental things you can do to secure an environment, have nothing to do with buying AI-driven threat hunting tools.
What are they?
Control 1 is inventorying your enterprise assets. Control 2 is inventorying your software. You prepare by pulling out a whiteboard and literally mapping out your network architecture.
Just drawing it out.
Yes. You document your external IP addresses.
Yes.
You figure out exactly who your third-party vendors are and what access they have to your systems.
And none of that costs money.
$0. You can enable built-in command line auditing in Windows right now, utilizing group policy at absolutely 0 cost.
Wow.
You prepare by sitting down with your executive team and writing the policies that govern how a data breach will be communicated. None of this requires a SIEM. It just requires institutional knowledge.
Because if you intimately know your own environment, spotting an attacker doesn't require $1 million dashboard.
Exactly. It just requires paying attention to the baseline you've already established.
So for anyone listening to this deep dive right now, take 30 minutes tomorrow morning and map out your top 3 critical assets, where they live on the network, and exactly which human being is responsible for them.
That is tangible preparation.
Now that we know why we need a plan and what it looks like in theory, we need to see how these phases actually hold up under fire.
Well, theory goes out the window pretty fast.
Right. Let's trace a modern ransomware attack from the attacker's perspective, because the reality of how these attacks unfold is very different from the Hollywood perception.
Very different. The Hollywood perception is that a hacker violently smashes through a firewall with a flurry of keystrokes, and instantly skulls appear on every screen in the building.
And right, lots of green text falling down the screen.
Exactly. The reality is much slower and far more methodical. We can understand this by looking at the cyber kill chain. An attack rarely starts with a highly sophisticated, custom-built zero-day exploit.
How does it start then?
It almost always starts with the delivery phase. This is the phishing email that slips past the spam filter, containing a malicious macro hidden inside a Word document.
Or that exposed RDP port we talked about.
Right. An attacker running automated scans across the internet, looking for any company that left an RDP port open and brute forcing the password.
Okay, so once they have that initial foothold, they don't just detonate the ransomware right then and there.
Never. If they detonate immediately, they only encrypt one single workstation.
That just doesn't pay out much.
Right? That doesn't result in a multi-million-dollar payout.
Yeah.
So once they get that initial access, we enter the weaponization and escalation phases. But more importantly, we enter the waiting game.
The waiting game.
Modern ransomware groups operate like patient intelligence agencies. They might be inside a network for days, weeks, or sometimes even months, remaining completely silent.
Just watching.
Conducting internal reconnaissance. They're mapping the active directory structure. They want to find the domain controllers.
And they are doing this while trying to look like normal employees, right? The concept of living off the land.
Precisely. They don't want to bring loud custom malware into the environment right away because your antivirus might actually catch it.
So what do they use?
They live off the land. They use the legitimate administrative tools that are already built into the Windows operating system. They use PowerShell to run reconnaissance scripts. They use Windows Management Instrumentation WMI to move laterally from one machine to another.
And because these tools are signed by Microsoft.
And used by your own IT team every day.
Yeah.
The antivirus software completely ignores them. The attacker is looking to elevate their privileges. They want to find an IT administrator who left their credentials cached in the memory of a server.
They want the keys to the kingdom.
They want the keys. But most importantly, above all else, they are hunting for your backups.
This is the part that truly changes the threat landscape for me. They aren't just looking for live data to hold hostage. They're actively hunting for your safety net.
Because their business model relies entirely on leverage. They know that if you have a clean, easily accessible backup of your data, you will simply wipe your infected servers, restore the backups, and ignore their ransom demand.
You'll just tell them to get lost.
Exactly. So to guarantee they get paid, they have to destroy your ability to recover. Before a single live file is ever encrypted, they execute a campaign of backup destruction.
How do they do that?
They'll use built-in commands, like vsadmin.exe, to quietly delete the Windows volume shadow copies on every single server. If they find your mapped network drives where your centralized backups are stored, they'll navigate into those folders and corrupt or encrypt the backup files themselves.
Oh, man.
They systematically shred the safety net. And only after they have absolute confirmation that you have no way to recover do they push the button and initiate the live file encryption across the entire enterprise.
It is terrifying when you map out the mechanics of it. I mean, this isn't a smash-and-grab robbery where someone throws a brick through a window and runs off with whatever they can grab in 60 seconds.
Not at all.
This is a burglar who quietly picks the lock on your back door, walks into your kitchen, makes themselves a sandwich, casually searches your house until they find the spare keys to your safe, cuts the phone line so you can't call for help, and then starts stealing your TV.
That is the exact analogy. And it highlights why the timeline of an incident is so crucial.
Right. And this brings up a massive point about containment. Why is early containment, catching them during that sandwich-making phase, so astronomically more important than trying to respond after the encryption has started?
Because once the encryption phase begins, the technical battle is effectively over. The damage is done. Your entire posture shifts from incident response to disaster recovery, crisis communications, and potentially negotiating with criminals through a third-party firm.
It's just damage control at that point.
Yeah, but during that sandwich-making phase, the reconnaissance and lateral movement phase, the attacker is inherently making noise.
They can't be totally invisible.
Right. No matter how stealthy they are, they're generating anomalous logs. They're creating failed login attempts as they try to guess admin passwords. They're establishing strange network connections from a workstation to a domain controller at 3:00 a.m.
Which goes back to knowing your baseline.
Exactly. If your preparation phase was solid and your defensive OD loop is tight, you can detect this lateral movement. You can identify the compromised endpoint and sever its connection to the network before the attacker ever finds your backups.
So catching them early is everything.
Early containment is the difference between replacing one compromised laptop for $1,000 and spending 2 weeks rebuilding your entire corporate infrastructure from scratch while the business hemorrhages revenue.
The takeaway for anyone listening to this deep dive right now: audit your external-facing infrastructure today. Go to your firewall settings and explicitly disable any public-facing RDP ports. Close the front door so the burglar can't just walk in.
Please do that today.
Now let's pivot to the practical realities of building this capability. And this is where most small teams freeze. They hear about everything an attacker does. They think preparing for that kind of sophisticated burglar requires hiring a massive consulting firm.
And it really doesn't.
Right, we can build a highly effective response capability for the cost of a few office supplies and some dedicated time. Let's start with the human element.
Building a response capability on a budget always starts with defining who does what. You need a documented incident response plan that clearly outlines your computer security incident response team, or CSRT.
CSRT, right.
Even if your entire IT department is only 2 or 3 people, you must have distinct, predefined roles. When chaos erupts, you cannot have everyone trying to do everything at once.
So what are the specific roles we need to define?
There are 3 non-negotiable roles. First, the incident commander.
Okay, the commander.
This role is not necessarily technical, it's administrative and strategic. The incident commander is the bridge between the technical reality of the breach and the business reality of the company.
They do the talking.
Right, they're the ones talking to the CEO, the legal team, and the public relations team. Their primary job is to shield the technical responders from executive distractions.
I love that. Shield the tech team. What's the second role?
Second, you have the technical responder. This is the person with their hands actually on the keyboard. They're analyzing the logs, hunting the threat, capturing the forensic evidence, and executing the containment strategy.
And the third?
Third, you need a communications lead. This is the person who drafts the internal emails to the staff and the external statements to customers, based strictly on the facts approved by the incident commander.
Okay, but if you're a tiny team, say, a team of 2 people running IT for a 100-person company, how do you handle this without everyone wearing 5 hats and completely burning out?
Look, in a small business, you will absolutely wear multiple hats. That's just unavoidable. But the secret to surviving a prolonged incident without burning out is explicitly defining when you are wearing which hat.
So you separate the tasks by time.
By role boundary.
Yeah.
If there are only 2 of you, one person must firmly wear the incident commander hat. They handle the panicked phone calls from the executives. The other person must solely wear the technical responder hat.
Because if the tech person is doing both,
If the technical person has to stop analyzing memory dumps every 15 minutes to draft a status update for the CEO, the investigation grinds to a complete halt. You must divide the labor strictly and protect the time of the person doing the technical analysis.
that is so crucial. Once we have the team defined, we need to equip them. And this brings us to one of my favorite practical concepts from the sources, the jump kit.
Oh, the jump kit.
Yeah.
Essential.
It's basically a physical go bag for your security team. What actually goes into a zero-budget jump kit?
A physical jump kit is a must-have, and putting one together costs almost nothing. You want a dedicated backpack or a Pelican case that is pre-packed and sits in a secure location. First, you need several sanitized USB drives and external hard drives.
By sanitized, you mean?
I mean forensically wiped writing zeros across the entire drive.
Yeah.
You do this so you don't accidentally introduce cross-contamination or old malware from a previous incident onto a newly compromised machine.
That would be bad. Hey, boss, I fixed the ransomware, but I accidentally installed a Trojan from 3 years ago.
Exactly. Don't do that. Second, you want bootable open-source Linux distributions on those USB drives.
Why do we need bootable Linux drives if we run a Windows environment?
Because if a Windows machine is compromised, you cannot trust the Windows operating system to tell you the truth.
Oh, right, the Alexu principle, which we'll get to.
Right. The malware might be hiding itself from the task manager. You need to boot the machine into a clean external environment to investigate it. Tools like Kane, Sift, or Kali Linux are entirely free and specifically designed for forensics.
And what makes them different from just a normal Linux USB?
Crucially, they're designed not to auto-mount the host machine's hard drives when they boot up.
Why does that matter?
If you boot a normal Windows USB, it immediately starts reading and writing to the infected hard drive, altering timestamps and destroying the chain of custody. These forensic Linux distributions boot up silently and allow you to analyze the drive without altering a single byte of data.
Okay, so that's the software. What kind of hardware goes in the bag?
If you have a small budget, invest in a hardware write blocker. It's a small physical device that sits in line between the suspect hard drive you pulled from a machine and your clean forensic laptop.
And it just blocks writes.
Physically intercepts and blocks any write commands from reaching the suspect drive. This guarantees your analysis process doesn't accidentally overwrite the attacker's footprints. You also need very practical physical items.
Like what?
You want snagless LAN cables.
Snagless? Really?
Yes. Imagine you're rushing into a dense, messy server rack at 2:00 a.m. to isolate an infected server, and you pull a standard cable with a snag clip. It might catch on the cable next to it and accidentally rip the connection out of your primary uninfected database server.
Oh, wow. You just caused an outage yourself.
You just made it worse. The physical environment of an incident is usually terrible.
Stressful, dark, noisy.
Exactly. So put a good flashlight in the bag, but store the batteries in a separate plastic baggie so they don't leak and corrode the flashlight over the months or years the jump kit sits unused in a closet.
That is such a practical tip. What about communication tools in the bag?
You want a printed, laminated copy of your call tree. If your Microsoft 365 environment is compromised or your Exchange server is encrypted, you will not have access to your corporate directory to look up the phone number of your legal counsel or your backups administrator.
You need those numbers on paper.
On paper, right in the bag.
Inside that jump kit, alongside the call tree, we need our playbooks. But I want to clarify a massive point of confusion here. What is the actual difference between a security handbook and an incident response playbook? Because a lot of companies think they have a playbook, but they actually just have a handbook.
That distinction is critical. A handbook is a high-level policy document. It contains the overarching rules of engagement, compliance requirements, and general philosophies.
Like, we care about security.
Right. It says things like, the organization will strive to contain threats within 24 hours. A playbook, on the other hand, is a hyper-specific, step-by-step technical checklist designed for one specific scenario.
So it's actionable.
Very. When your screens are locking up and everyone is screaming, you do not want to be reading a 50-page philosophy document. You want a ransomware playbook that says, Step 1, physically disconnect the network cable from the affected machine. Step 2, leave the machine powered on. Step 3, call the incident commander at this specific phone number. Step 4, execute the memory capture script on the USB drive.
It tells you exactly what to do.
You need distinct, punchy playbooks for the most common scenarios. A ransomware infection, a phishing compromise leading to a stolen credential, a data exfiltration event, and maybe a denial of service attack.
And having those playbooks printed out is great, but how do we know if they actually work before the 4:50 p.m. Friday disaster strikes?
The absolute best and cheapest way to validate your playbooks is through tabletop exercises. This is the ultimate budget preparation tool.
How does that work?
You bring the key stakeholders together in a conference room, IT, human resources, legal, and a representative from executive management. You buy some coffee and donuts to keep the stress low, and you present a what-if scenario.
Walk us through what a tabletop inject actually sounds like.
Okay, you start simple. You stand at the whiteboard and say, okay, team, it's 2:00 p.m. on a Tuesday. The help desk just received 3 tickets from the HR department saying they cannot open any of their Excel spreadsheets, and the files have a weird, locked extension. What is our very first move?
And then you just let them talk.
You let the room talk. The IT person will say they're going to isolate the machines. Then you turn to the communications lead and ask, do we tell the rest of the company yet? You ask the legal counsel, does this trigger our 72-hour regulatory reporting window?
It forces them to actually use the playbook.
Exactly. A tabletop exercise is designed to expose all the gaps in your communication and all the flaws in your playbooks in a safe environment, rather than discovering them during a live breach.
The action item here is clear. You can build a physical jump kit this week. Grab a spare backpack, buy a few cheap 1 TB drives, download the free open source forensic tools like Kane, and print out your call tree.
It costs almost nothing.
Right. Now, having a jump kit ready to go is fantastic, but it raises a much bigger question for a small team. If you don't have a massive SIM alerting you, how do you even know the alarms should be ringing in the first place? How do you catch the bad guys without spending a fortune on software?
You detect the attacker by embracing the 5% rule. The core problem small teams face is that they think they need to capture and store every single packet of data traversing their network to have visibility.
Which is impossible.
Astronomically expensive. You are essentially duplicating all your network traffic. The 5% rule states that 5% of your data will tell you 95% of the story.
You don't need everything.
You don't need the payload, you just need the metadata. And the 2 most powerful forms of network metadata are NetFlow and DNS.
I love the analogy of looking at NetFlow as being similar to a traditional phone bill.
It's exactly like that.
When you get your phone bill at the end of the month, it doesn't contain audio recordings of your actual phone calls. It just shows you the metadata. Who called whom, the phone numbers involved, the exact time the call started, and exactly how many minutes the call lasted.
That is the perfect way to understand NetFlow. NetFlow is content-free metadata generated by your routers and switches. Because it lacks the actual payload data, the contents of the files being transferred, it's incredibly lightweight to store and analyze.
But is it actually useful for security?
Devastatingly effective. Let's go back to the attacker who was living off the land. Let's say they've packaged up 80 gigabytes of your customer database, and they're exfiltrating it to a server in a foreign country.
Okay.
If you're looking at NetFlow, you will see a massive spike in outbound byte counts from a database server that historically only ever talks to internal web servers.
Ah, so the pattern breaks.
Right. You don't need to read the payload to know that an 80 gigabyte outbound connection to an unknown IP address at 3:00 a.m. is a critical security event.
But wait, let me push back on this. If the attacker is smart, they're going to use fully encrypted traffic for their command and control, or C2, communications. If the payload is encrypted and I can't read it anyway, does NetFlow still help me? Am I totally blind?
You are not blind at all. That's the beauty of analyzing metadata. The encryption algorithm mathematically scrambles and hides the content of the conversation, but it absolutely cannot hide the existence of the conversation.
NetFlow still sees the envelope.
Exactly. It still gives you the source IP, the destination IP, the port number, the frequency of the connections, and the size of the packets. Attackers rely on automated malware to maintain persistence.
It has to talk back to them.
That malware has to phone home to the command and control server to ask for new instructions. If a workstation in your accounting department is beaconing out to an unknown external IP address exactly every 60 minutes and sending exactly 5 kilobytes of encrypted data every single time,
That perfectly rhythmic robotic behavior.
it stands out like a sore thumb in NetFlow. Humans don't browse the web in perfect 60-minute intervals. The metadata betrays the attacker's automated presence, regardless of the encryption.
That is incredibly empowering. Now, what about DNS? We touched on it briefly, but the sources refer to DNS as the one-true king of tracking C2 servers.
DNS, the domain name system, is the phone book of the internet. It translates human-readable domain names into IP addresses. Malware heavily relies on DNS to find its command and control infrastructure.
How so?
Well, in the early days of cyber attacks, malware authors would hard-code specific IP addresses into their viruses. But defenders caught on and they would just block those IPs at the firewall, instantly neutralizing the malware.
So the attackers adapted.
Of course. To get around this, attackers started using domain generation algorithms, or DGAs. The malware generates thousands of random gibberish domain names every day and tries to connect to them. The attacker only has to register one of those random domains to successfully establish a connection.
So how does monitoring DNS help us fight that?
By collecting passive DNS queries from your network, you gain incredible visibility. You can see when an internal endpoint suddenly starts querying strange, newly registered, completely random-looking domains that no human would ever legitimately type into a browser.
It just looks like noise.
Exactly. And furthermore, you can actively use DNS to contain the threat by implementing a DNS sinkhole or a response policy zone, an RPZ.
How does an RPZ work mechanically?
An RPZ essentially turns your internal DNS server into an application-aware firewall. You subscribe to threat intelligence feeds that provide lists of known malicious domains.
Okay.
If an infected laptop on your network asks the DNS server to resolve one of those malicious domains, the RPZ intercepts the request. Instead of returning the real IP address of the attacker server, the RPZ returns the IP address of a safe internal server that you control the sinkhole.
Oh, that's clever.
The malware tries to connect, but it hits your sinkhole instead. You have successfully blocked the command and control traffic, and more importantly, the logs on your sinkhole immediately identify exactly which laptop is infected.
So we have visibility at the network level with NetFlow and DNS. What about down on the actual endpoints, the laptops and servers? If we can't afford expensive endpoint detection and response agents, what are we looking at?
You leverage the telemetry that Microsoft already built into the operating system. You use Windows event logs. Specifically, you want to enable and monitor Event ID 4688.
Event ID 4688, what is that?
This is the process creation event. By default, it might be turned off for not capturing the full picture, but via group policy, you can tell Windows to log every single time a process executes, and critically, to log the exact command line arguments that were used.
Why are the command line arguments so important?
Because attackers rarely just double-click an executable. They run complex scripts. If an attacker uses PowerShell to download a malicious payload, they don't want you to read the script. So they'll encode the command in base 64.
So it just looks like gibberish.
To the naked eye, it just looks like a massive block of random alphanumeric characters. But if you have command line auditing enabled, Event ID 4688 will record the execution of PowerShell.exe, followed by the encoded command flag and that massive block of text.
And that's a red flag.
That specific pattern is an immediate red flag. To take it a step further, you can install Sysmin, which is a completely free tool from the Microsoft sysinternal suite.
Sysmin.
Yeah, Sysmin Event ID 1 acts like Event ID 4688 on steroids. It not only captures the process creation, but it links it to the parent process and calculates the hash of the executable. You can see exactly what spawned the malicious script.
This brings us to a fundamental shift in how we think about detection. The difference between an IOC and an IOA. Indicators of compromise versus indicators of attack.
Yes, understanding this distinction is crucial for moving from a reactive posture to a proactive one. An indicator of compromise, an IOC, is inherently retrospective.
Meaning it's looking backward?
Right. It's a known malicious IP address, a specific file hash, or a malicious domain name. Searching for IOCs means the threat intelligence community has already identified the threat. If you find an IOC on your network, it confirms that the damage is already done.
You are finding the burglar's muddy footprints in your living room after the TV has already been stolen.
Exactly.
And an indicator of attack, an IOA, is different.
An IOA focuses on behavior. It catches the attacker in the act of trying to pick the lock. It doesn't rely on knowing the specific IP address or the specific hash of the malware. Instead, it looks for the techniques the attacker must use to succeed.
Give me an example of an IOA.
For example, an IOA would be a log entry showing an account actively trying to clear the Windows security event logs using the webtoolkl command. Or it might be a sudden massive spike in failed login attempts across multiple user accounts, indicating a password spray attack.
Or deleting backups.
Yes, the execution of a tool like vysadmin trying to delete shadow copies. These behaviors are malicious regardless of who the attacker is. By focusing on IOAs, you can catch novel, zero-day attacks because the fundamental behavior of an attacker moving laterally rarely changes.
If you are listening right now, open up your group policy tomorrow morning and turn on Windows command line auditing to capture Event ID 4688. It costs nothing, it takes minutes to configure, and it provides massive visibility into what is actually executing on your endpoints.
Do it. You won't regret it.
Okay, let's advance the scenario. Your free DNS logs or your Event ID 4688 alerts just tipped you off. You see the encoded PowerShell script. The attacker is definitely inside the network.
Your heart rate spikes.
The adrenaline hits. What is the very first move? This brings us to the containment phase, and specifically the most agonizing dilemma an incident commander will ever face.
It is the ultimate test of nerves. The dilemma is known as watch and learn versus pull the plug, and there is no universally correct answer. There are only trade-offs and severe risks to both approaches.
Let's explore those risks. Because if I see a compromised server, my immediate instinct is to run into the server room and physically rip the power cord out of the wall to stop the spread.
That's the natural human reaction. Pull the plug to stop the bleeding. But if you immediately sever the power to a server, you instantly destroy all the volatile memory, the RAM.
Why does that matter?
Because modern malware often runs entirely in memory to avoid leaving artifacts on the hard drive. If you pull the plug, you lose the active network connections, you lose the running processes, and crucially, the decryption key for the ransomware might currently be sitting in plain text in the RAM.
Wait, really? The key might be right there.
Yes. By shutting the machine down, you erase the key forever. Furthermore, if the attacker is actively monitoring the environment and they see their connection suddenly drop, you immediately tip them off that you were onto them.
And they might panic and retaliate.
They might have a secondary backdoor established, and realizing they're caught, they might immediately trigger a destructive payload across the rest of the network before you can find them.
So pulling the plug destroys evidence and alerts the enemy. But what happens if we do the opposite? What if we choose to watch and learn?
Watching and learning is incredibly valuable for mapping the full scope of the intrusion. You leave the system running and monitor the network traffic. You watch to see what other systems the attacker connects to, what credentials they're trying to use, and what data they are targeting.
We're gathering intelligence.
Exactly. You gather intelligence to ensure you can eradicate them completely. But you are playing with fire.
Because they're still in there.
Right. If you watch them for too long, you might accidentally watch them gain access to the domain controller, steal the master database, and deploy enterprise-wide encryption while you are busy taking notes.
It's exactly like finding a leak in a submarine. Do you immediately slam the bulkhead doors shut, sealing off that compartment and potentially trapping some of your own crew inside just to save the ship?
Or do you try to patch it?
Right. Try to observe the leak, figure out the structural integrity, and attempt to patch it while icy water is actively rushing in and threatening to sink the entire vessel. How do we make this agonizing decision easier so we aren't paralyzed during an incident?
You make it easier by utilizing nuanced, logical containment tactics rather than relying on physical actions like pulling power cords. You want to sever the attacker's access without altering the state of the machine.
Oh.
Instead of shutting the server down, you use network isolation. You log into your switch or your hypervisor and isolate the infected machine onto a quarantine VLAN.
A separate network.
In this quarantine zone, the machine cannot talk to the rest of the company, and it cannot reach the internet, but it remains fully powered on. This preserves the volatile memory so your forensics team can capture it.
What other containment actions can we take beyond just isolating the machine?
You address the identity vector. You immediately disable compromised user accounts and service accounts in Active Directory. You force a reset of all VPN tokens and cloud access tokens, like Enter ID. You block the command and control communications at the perimeter using your firewalls or the DNS sinkholes we discussed earlier.
But implementing quarantine VLANs and manipulating routing on the fly during a crisis sounds incredibly difficult if the network isn't designed for it.
It is nearly impossible if you haven't prepared. This is why pre-incident network segmentation is the most powerful containment tool you can build.
What does that mean exactly?
Well, if your network is entirely flat, meaning every device can freely talk to every other device without restriction, an infection on a receptionist PC can spread directly to your core database servers in seconds.
Because there's nothing stopping it.
Right. In a flat network, your only containment option might be shutting down the entire business. But if you have implemented segmentation, meaning your human resources department is on a completely separate network segment from your engineering team, and your workstations are strictly isolated from your server infrastructure with firewalls in between, you change the game.
It limits the blast radius.
Exactly. When an incident occurs in HR, you can logically sever the routing to that specific segment. The blast radius is tightly contained, and the rest of the business continues to operate and generate revenue while you deal with the localized threat.
So the action here is to establish your pull-the-plug threshold criteria today.
Yeah.
Decide right now, in a calm environment, what specific behaviors or risks dictate an immediate hard shutdown versus a logical quarantine.
Write it down.
Yes, write those rules down so no one has to agonizingly ask for permission during a crisis. Okay, we have executed containment, the bleeding has stopped, the infected machine is quarantined. Now we transition into the forensics phase.
Time to figure out what happened.
Right. We need to figure out exactly how they got in and what they did. But as a small team, we can't afford to hire a digital forensics firm at $500 an hour. How do we investigate without completely destroying the crime scene?
You conduct the investigation by strictly adhering to the golden rules of forensics. And the absolute most important rule is the order of volatility.
The order of volatility.
When you're gathering evidence from a compromised system, you must capture the most volatile data first, because it is the data that is most easily destroyed by the passage of time or the operation of the system.
Walk us through the order. What do we grab first?
You always capture physical memory, the RAM, first. RAM is constantly overwriting itself, and it is instantly erased if the machine loses power. After RAM, you capture live system data, active network connections, running processes, and logged-on users.
And then the hard drive.
Only after you have secured all of that volatile data do you worry about capturing the static data sitting on the hard disk, like the registry files or the master file table. The disk data isn't going anywhere unless the system is actively being wiped.
This brings up a fascinating concept mentioned in the sources, the Alexiou principle. What exactly is that, and why does it matter?
The Alexiou principle was named after a pioneer in digital forensics, Mike Alexiou. The principle essentially dictates two things. First, you should never blindly trust the operating system of a compromised host to tell you the truth.
Like we said earlier.
Right. If an attacker has compromised the kernel, they can make the task manager lie to you. They can hide their malicious processes from standard built-in tools. Second, and most importantly, it states that you should not alter the state of the machine if you do not intimately understand what your actions are doing.
Which means don't just poke around.
It is a stark warning against the most common mistake IT administrators make during an incident: logging into the infected machine and clicking around to see what's wrong.
Why is clicking around so destructive? I've always compared bad forensics to a detective walking through a bloody crime scene with muddy boots. You're frantically trying to find clues, but you were stomping all over the evidence, leaving your own footprints everywhere.
That is precisely what happens at a digital level.
Yeah.
The Windows operating system is incredibly noisy. If you log into a compromised machine, open the event viewer, open a file explorer window to look at the C drive, or launch an antivirus scan, you are generating thousands of new events.
So you're overwriting the old ones.
You are altering the last access timestamps on files. You're writing new data to the disk, which could potentially overwrite deleted files residing in unallocated space that an attacker tried to hide.
Oh, man.
You are pushing critical evidence out of the RAM to make room for the graphical interface tools you just opened. You are actively overwriting the exact forensic artifacts you need to find the root cause.
It also invites confirmation bias, doesn't it?
Massively. An administrator logs in, clicks around, finds a piece of commodity adware that superficially matches the alert they received, deletes it, and declares the incident resolved.
Job done.
They stop looking. In doing so, they completely miss the sophisticated backdoor the actual attacker installed deep in the registry 2 weeks prior.
So as a small team, If we can't click around and we can't afford to do a bit-by-bit forensic clone of a 2 terabyte hard drive, which takes hours, what do we do?
You employ triage forensics. The concept relies again on the 5% rule. We don't need a forensic clone of the entire hard drive right away. 95% of the operating system files are irrelevant to the investigation.
We just need the good stuff.
We just need to gather the tiny fraction of artifacts that will answer our questions. How did they get in? What did they execute? And what did they steal? We use automated free tools to do this swiftly and silently.
What are these specific free tools?
For memory, you can use tools like Dumpit or FTK Imager Lite to silently capture the RAM to a USB drive. Once you have the memory dump on your clean forensic laptop, you use the Volatility Framework, a free, open-source memory forensics tool to analyze it.
What does Volatility do?
Volatility can hunt through the memory dump to find hidden processes, extract injected code, and recover decrypted passwords that were sitting in RAM.
That's awesome. And for the hard drive?
For the hard drive data, you use a tool like KP, the Quell Artifact Parser and Extractor. It is phenomenal. KP is designed to execute incredibly quickly on a live system, targeting and copying only the most critical forensic artifacts. The master file table, the Windows event logs, the prefetch files which show what applications were executed, and the registry hives. It grabs exactly what you need in minutes, minimizing your footprint on the crime scene.
This is a perfect action item. Download a free memory dumping tool to your jump kit today. Go to a test machine, plug in the USB, and practice capturing the RAM. Get familiar with the command line arguments and how long the process takes before the immense pressure of a real incident is bearing down on you.
Practice is key.
Okay, we have analyzed the artifacts. We know exactly how the attacker got in. Maybe it was a compromised VPN credential. We know exactly what they did. They moved laterally and staged data. And we have isolated the infected systems. The bleeding has stopped.
Finally.
Now we have to clean up the mess and get the business back online. The pressure from the executive suite at this point is going to be at a boiling point. They are losing money every hour. The instinct is to scream at the IT team to just hit restore on the backup console immediately.
And that instinct is the fastest way to doom the organization.
Really?
The eradication and recovery phases are where impatience destroys companies. There is a cardinal rule in incident response. Never, ever restore your backups before fully confirming that the threat is eradicated and the backdoor is permanently closed.
What happens if you rush it?
I have seen this play out in the real world countless times. An organization gets hit with ransomware. The executives panic and demand immediate restoration. The IT team wipes the servers and restores the data from the backups.
The servers come back online, everyone cheers.
But they never found the root cause. They never realized the attacker had compromised a service account and hidden a persistent backdoor in the network infrastructure. 2 hours after the restoration is complete, the attacker logs back in using the backdoor, navigates to the newly restored servers, and encrypts everything all over again.
Wow. So they're back to square one.
The company just wasted their time, exhausted their team, and they are back to zero. You must comprehensively patch the initial vector, disable the compromised accounts, remove the persistence mechanisms, and verify the network is clean before you even think about recovery.
When it finally is time to recover, we have to talk about the backups themselves. The sources emphasize the 3-2-1 backup rule as the ultimate lifeline.
The 3-2-1 rule is the single best defense against ransomware. Full stop.
Yeah.
It dictates a very specific architecture.
Break it down.
You should have 3 total copies of your critical data. Those copies should be stored on 2 different media types, perhaps one on a local storage array for fast recovery and one on cloud storage. And critically, one of those copies must be kept off-site and completely offline.
I want to focus on that word, offline, because this is where I see a massive vulnerability in how small businesses operate. If I'm looking at my backup server right now and it is joined to the exact same Active Directory domain as my primary servers for the sake of easy management and automated syncs, aren't I essentially storing my fire extinguisher in the exact same burning room as the fire?
You absolutely are. This is the most common architectural failure we see.
Oh, it's so common.
If your backups are online, network attached,
Yeah.
and accessible via the same credentials as the rest of your environment, they are not backups. They are simply additional targets for the attacker. If an attacker gains domain admin credentials and your backup server is on that domain, they will authenticate to the backup console and manually issue the wipe command. Your backups must be segmented.
How so?
They must exist in a separate trust domain, requiring completely separate, out-of-band authentication and, ideally, multi-factor authentication. Or better yet, they should be truly immutable or physically air-gapped. meaning they cannot be altered or deleted by any network command once written. Offline, tested backups are the only true safety net.
And when planning this recovery architecture, the business needs to stop talking about gigabytes and terabytes and start understanding two critical metrics in plain English: RTO and RPO. Let's break those down.
RTO and RPO translate technical reality into business risk. RTO stands for Recovery Time Objective.
Recovery time objective.
In plain English, it answers the question, how long can the business afford to be offline before the financial damage becomes fatal?
So speed.
Speed. If you run an e-commerce site processing $10,000 a minute, your RTO might be 4 hours. If you run a brick-and-mortar legal firm, your RTO might be 2 days. The RTO dictates the speed of your recovery architecture. If your RTO is 4 hours, you cannot rely on tape backups stored in a salt mine. You need synchronous cloud replication.
And RPO.
RPO is the recovery point objective. It answers the question, how much historical data can the business afford to lose permanently?
How far back can we go?
Exactly. If you only run your backups once every night at midnight, your RPO is 24 hours. If your database server is encrypted at 11:00 p.m. on Friday, you lose all the transactions that occurred that entire day. Understanding your RTO and RPO dictates whether you can rely on your rebuild process or whether you're forced to engage with the ransomware actors to buy the decryption key because your backups are too slow or too old to save the business.
Actionable closing for eradication and recovery. Perform a blind test of your backup restores tomorrow. Don't just look for a green checkmark on a dashboard. Actually restore a server to an isolated test environment. Prove the data is fully there, prove it is clean, and prove that your team actually knows the technical steps to execute the restoration under pressure.
Do it before you need it.
We've covered the technology, the forensics, and the recovery. But if you take absolutely nothing else from this deep dive, remember this undeniable truth. During a major incident, the technology rarely fails.
It's the people.
The firewalls will do what they are told. The backup software will do what it is told. It is the people who fail.
Managing the chaos of the human beings involved in an incident is frequently harder than reverse engineering the malware itself. Communication breakdowns are the #1 cause of incident response failure.
I can see that.
When an incident scales up from a single infected laptop to a company-wide outage, people panic. Departments start siloing information to protect themselves from blame. The legal team is demanding answers about regulatory exposure. The executives are demanding updates every 10 minutes.
Everyone wants an answer now.
And those demands cascade down to the technical responders who are constantly interrupted from actually investigating the breach to answer emails. This is exactly why the role of the incident commander, which we discussed earlier, is so crucial.
The incident commander is the human firewall. I love comparing them to an orchestra conductor. They don't play the instruments, but if they aren't there, it's just noise.
That's a perfect analogy.
And one of the most critical things they have to manage is the flow of information. How do they communicate what is happening without accidentally leaking sensitive breach data prematurely?
They utilize the Traffic Light Protocol, or TLP. It is a standardized, globally recognized system for marking threat intelligence and internal memos to dictate how widely they can be shared.
Break down the colors for us.
It's simple and highly effective. Information marked TLP Red is highly sensitive. It is restricted strictly to the people present in that specific meeting or email thread. It cannot be shared with anyone else, not even other people in the same company.
So red means stop. Keep it here.
Right. TLP Amber means the information can be shared within your own organization, but strictly on a need-to-know basis to take action.
And green.
TLP Green means the information can be shared broadly within your sector or with trusted vendor partners, but it cannot be released publicly. And TLP Clear means the information carries minimal risk and can be freely distributed to the public.
Why is enforcing TLP so important during an incident?
Because well-meaning employees cause massive secondary crises. An IT admin might write up a detailed technical summary of how the network was breached and email it to the whole IT department marked as TLP Amber.
Okay, that seems fine.
But if you don't enforce those rules, an engineer might forward that email to a friend at a cybersecurity vendor to ask for advice. That vendor might forward it internally, and within hours, your highly sensitive internal breach details leak to the tech press before your PR team has even drafted a public statement. TLP prevents the chaotic spread of sensitive data.
And speaking of the press and public statements, the incident commander also has to manage the legal clock.
The regulatory timeline is a minefield. Depending on your jurisdiction and the type of data you hold, healthcare records, financial data, European citizen data under GDPR. The moment you confirm a material data breach, a countdown clock starts ticking.
The clock starts.
Under certain regulations, you might have exactly 72 hours, or perhaps 4 days, under recent SEC rules to notify the relevant authorities. The incident commander and the legal counsel need to clearly define exactly when that clock starts.
Because that's open to interpretation, right?
Exactly. Does it start the moment an alert fires? Or does it start only when the forensics team confirms that personally identifiable data was actually exfiltrated? You need predefined criteria for this. You also need predefined triggers for when it is time to call in external legal counsel, when to activate your cyber insurance policy, and when to bring in law enforcement.
That leads to a critical question for small teams. Let's be realistic. When is the exact moment a small IT team should swallow their pride, admit defeat, and call in an external digital forensics and incident response firm?
You call for external help the moment the scope of the incident exceeds either your technical capability or your human capacity.
Don't wait.
Do not wait. If you have been analyzing logs for 10 hours and you still cannot confidently identify the root cause of the intrusion, you need help. If the attacker has gained domain admin privileges and you do not possess the deep architectural knowledge required to safely evict them and rebuild the Active Directory environment, you need an external firm.
Because the stakes are too high.
Trying to figure out complex enterprise forensics on the fly by watching YouTube tutorials while the business is offline and hemorrhaging $50,000 an hour is a recipe for absolute disaster. Acknowledge your limits early.
If you are listening, here is a vital step regarding communication. Create an out-of-band communication channel today. If you use Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace for your corporate email and your network is compromised, you must assume the attacker has compromised the email environment as well.
They're watching everything you say.
You cannot use your corporate email to coordinate your incident response strategy. If you do, the attacker will literally be reading your playbook in real time. Set up a separate, isolated cloud tenant specifically for the IR team, or mandate the use of an encrypted, out-of-band messaging app like Signal to coordinate the defense securely.
Yeah, that out-of-band channel is non-negotiable.
Okay, let's fast forward. The forensics are done, the vulnerabilities are patched, the data is restored, the systems are back online, the executives are finally breathing, and everyone on the IT team desperately wants to go home and sleep for a week.
They earned it.
But if you stop right there, you have wasted a massive, potentially transformative opportunity.
This brings us to phase 6 of PICERL, lessons learned.
The one nobody does.
The phase that almost nobody actually does, but it is unequivocally the most valuable phase of the entire life cycle. I always encourage teams to reframe their thinking. Treat every single incident, even a minor malware alert that was contained in 5 minutes, as a free penetration test provided by a real-world adversary.
I love that framing, a free penetration test.
It is exactly that. You pay consulting firms tens of thousands of dollars to find the holes in your network. An incident does it for free.
They just showed you exactly where the holes are.
The adversary just showed you exactly where your defensive architecture is weak. They showed you exactly which employee is still vulnerable to phishing. They showed you exactly which technical control failed to trigger an alert. If you don't document that and learn from it, you are guaranteed to suffer the exact same attack again.
It is like getting a stress test on your heart. It is terrifying in the moment, but the data it provides tells the surgeon exactly which arteries need to be bypassed before you suffer a fatal heart attack.
Great analogy.
But how do we conduct this review, this post-mortem, without it devolving into a toxic witch hunt, where everyone is just pointing fingers to save their own jobs?
You have to establish a culture that demands a blameless post-mortem. The focus of the review meeting must be strictly on systemic failures, not human errors.
Systemic, not human.
Let's use an example. If an employee, let's say Susan in HR, clicks a malicious phishing link and compromises her laptop, the post-mortem should never be about blaming Susan for being careless.
Right, because humans are fallible. The system shouldn't collapse because one person made a mistake.
Exactly. The blameless post-mortem asks systemic questions. Why didn't our email security gateway identify and filter the malicious payload before it reached Susan's inbox?
Good question.
Why did the endpoint antivirus software fail to detect the execution of the malware when she clicked it? Why was Susan's account, which only needs access to HR software, technically allowed to run an executable file from a temporary internet folder in the first place.
You fix the system.
You add defense in depth.
Right.
You don't just blame the human and file the report away.
But here is the ultimate challenge for the IT director listening to this. You write the brilliant post-mortem report. You identify the systemic failures. How do you actually force executive leadership to allocate the budget required to fix those systems instead of them just filing the report in a drawer and moving on?
You use structured communication to close the loop, specifically translating technical jargon into the language of business risk. A great framework for this is the SBAR format situation, background, assessment, recommendation.
Okay, SBAR.
You do not go to the CEO and say, we need $20,000 because our EDR failed to catch a reflective DLL injection.
Their eyes will just glaze over.
Exactly. They won't care. You present it as a business case.
Yeah.
Situation. We suffered a ransomware outbreak that cost the business $50,000 in downtime and required 40 hours of overtime.
Now they're listening.
Background. The attacker bypassed our current outdated antivirus software because it relies on legacy signatures rather than behavioral analysis.
Okay.
Assessment. Our current security posture leaves us highly vulnerable to a repeat attack, which could result in regulatory fines and loss of client trust. Recommendation. We must invest $20,000 in a modern endpoint detection and response platform, which has a direct return on investment by mitigating a proven $50,000 risk.
You speak the language of risk mitigation and ROI.
That is how you secure funding out of the ashes of an incident.
That is incredibly practical advice for closing the loop. The action item is to build the muscle memory. Schedule a mandatory 30-minute blameless post-incident review for the very next security alert your team resolves, no matter how small it is.
Just get used to doing it.
We have covered an immense amount of ground today. Before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over. We spent a lot of time talking about malware, ransomware, and detecting malicious scripts.
Yeah, we did.
But what happens when the attacker isn't using malware at all? What if they are entirely living off the land, using your own built-in IT tools, your own PowerShell scripts, and your own administrative privileges against you?
Which is happening more and more.
Your free detection tools won't see a virus. They will just see an administrator doing their job. That means your ultimate defense isn't a piece of software. It is context. It is knowing your environment, your assets, and your people so intimately that you can sense when a legitimate tool is being used with malicious intent.
Context is absolutely everything. When the adversary uses your own tools as weapons, the only thing that exposes them is your deep understanding of what is normal for your network. And that, fundamentally, is the true essence of the preparation phase.
To bring it all together, here is your practical incident response starter pack summary. Do these 4 things this week. 1, write a 1-page physical IR contact list, a call tree.
Yep.
2, build specific, actionable playbooks for 3 scenarios: ransomware, phishing, and data loss. 3, schedule and run 1 30-minute tabletop exercise with your stakeholders this quarter. And 4, verify and blindly test your offline backup restores today.
Best advice you can get.
That wraps up this episode of SecOps, powered by Cyber Viewpoint. Incidents are inevitable, but chaos is optional. Build the plan, test the plan, and when the time comes, trust the plan. Until next time, back up your data, know your contacts, and please test your restores.